Good evening and welcome back to Marty's Tying Bench. Tonight we're putting together Vice Squad kits, and the pattern for this week is another Denny Rickards pattern, Seal Bugger. Just a great leech pattern. Very much like a Simi Seal leech, only with the emphasis on a long and wispy tail and the introduction of some hackle in there with the Simi Seal fibers. We're going to tie it a little bit big for the spring, so it's on an size 8 hook, and we do want some weight up at the front, so I've got some .020 lead, ten turns. You can of course use more, or you can use bigger lead, but I'm going to slide that forward, and that's going to be important for the action of this fly when we fish it. For thread, I've got 140 denier uni thread. I like a little heavier thread on this one because sometimes I'll do this with a split thread technique to do the dubbing brush, and just nice to have a little stronger thread. I'm going to save some space up the front for tying off, get my fingernail right up against the lead to hold it in place as I come to the back, and create another little thread dam back there. The dubbing is going to cover it, so I don't feel the need to cover all that lead with thread. For tail, we're going to use Olive marabou. So let me grab a typical blood quill here. And you don't want those straight points at the end. You want to peel off of the side of the feather so that they're a little bit irregular and they move a little better in the water. And keep it sparse. That's important. This is probably even too much. So let's pull a few fibers out. There, very sparse. I'm going to dampen it just a little bit so we can see its length. You want the length to be a shank length and a half. That's relatively long. So here's where it's going to sit. So that's where I'm going to tie it in. And just for neatness sake, I like to cut those stubs off right now. And when I get about halfway back, I'm going to add a little bit of flash for the tail. It's going to be erratic looking, but you want just anything that's a fine cut. This is a ice wing. If you got some angel hair, that stuff is a little bit straighter. But I only need a couple strands of it. And by a couple, I mean like 3. And not paying much attention to how neat it is, just get a little bit tied in. Stroke everything back over the top, and then continue your wraps until you're over the barb of the hook. Now watch what happens when I loosen the thread. That marabou is going to want to creep around, so while it's tight I'm going to get a couple of wraps advancing it forward. Now I can trim that flash. It's going to be unruly, but the water is going to take care of that when I start fishing it. The hackle it's a nice long whiting grizzly dyed olive. And what I'm going to do is gently stroke the fibers away from the stem. Until I get down to the tip. We're going to tie this one in by the tip. There, back above the barb. Now I'm going to move a little bit forward so I can start a dubbing loop. Now you can split the thread. You might want to refer to the video we did on the golden shiner if you want to use that technique. Otherwise you just need about 4 or 5 inches of dubbing loop. Now you can see I just restarted the thread, and then I'm going to tie back over those two strands of thread, and there they're bound together. Now the thread can go all the way to the front. Let's let that sit while I get my dubbing ready. Now to spin it, you can use a nice heavy duty tool. There are some other tools like these hook on a handle that you can use to twist. In a pinch, I've used these electrical test probes, the kind of things you'd use to display a fly. That's what I'll use today. To get my dubbing ready, I want to get the fibers running the same direction. This is Arizona Simi Seal Canadian Olive. So I'm just going to pinch the big bundle and peel some out. That's 3 pinches. That's about half of what I'm going to need. So I'll get another 3. Now the light's hitting that pretty good, but this is actually pretty sparse. Alright, now here's my dubbing loop. Get my test clip on it, and with the finger I'm holding the loop open. And I'll take that first little bundle and slide it right up by the hook. Next one below it, and then I'm going to gently take my finger out so the threads are together. At this point you still got some control where you can reach up and spread these fibers apart to kind of control the density. If they start to slide out one end, you can tug them back in through. I want it pretty symmetrical here, about the same amount out each side. When you get it the way you want it, just start twisting. I've got a little bit of tension on the thread. I want it to stay tight, but not so much that it would break. Now it's going to be lumpy, but that's okay. This is going to all work out in the final version. Now I'm just going to kind of pluck at it with a wire brush. Velcro works just fine. And now I'll start wrapping. It might take a couple of turns before you get to your dubbing brush, but as soon as it starts winding Simi Seal on, then you just start moving forward. And every couple of turns, brush everything back. And that 4-inch dubbing loop should get you pretty darn close to the perfect amount. I got a little bit extra, but that's okay. Won't use it. I want to get a couple of turns before I double this back to lock it in. Now we're going to pluck that Simi Seal out again. This time I will use the Velcro. You could still use the wire brush, but all I'm going to do is just kind of touch and pull, get it away from the hook. Now we're going to wrap this hackle forward, and you only want to make 4 turns to get from here to the front. It might take 5, but do your best to try and just make it take 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 4.5. Now you see how that bound down a lot of those fibers, but we'll be able to pull those back out. Let's do a whip finish here so we don't lose our work. Now I use black thread, but You could use orange, end up with a little hothead. You can put a glass bead on the front. There's a lot that you can do here. Now that I've got that tied in, I can just touch and pull. And now just kind of gently comb it towards the back. And there's our leech shape. So there you go, Denny Rickards seal bugger.